Thank you very much, Glenn. Appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that ICLR puts on these functions. They perform an extremely valuable service to our industry, and certainly a great deal of thanks go to Paul Kovacs and his crew and to Glenn. So thank you very much for inviting us. So we'll just get started. And I'm going to give you some context. And it was interesting that you had somebody from State Farm, because you've got State Farm over here and Peace Hills over here. We are a very small company. We are right in Western Canada. We were at about $180 million in total. And we are a broker company, so we're not direct writers such as State Farm is. And so we definitely have a somewhat different perspective. So what I want to talk about today is a couple of the meeting objectives that Paul had set out, and that is, or perhaps Glenn had set out, and that is to keep wildland fire threat front of mind for all levels of government, and lessons learned from 2003 and 2011. So when I pondered the questions, what I did was, well, I thought, what did we learn from 2003? And so I went to the city of Kelowna, didn't physically go there, I called them, and spoke to a fellow there, an environmental expert. And so he advised me that post-2003, they demanded all building permit applications be presented with Fire Smart Initiative covenant. That proved very onerous for one-off builders, so they've quit doing that for the one-offs, and now they only demand that as a part of new subdivision development. And they require professional proposal as part of the application process, and will on occasion require a bond to ensure compliance. Most of the new developments are now in wildland interface areas, of course, and I asked for several examples of what that actually meant in terms of undertakings, and it was the things that are perhaps obvious to this group, and that is clearing underbrush and deadwood so as to reduce fuel, limbing of live trees to a certain height, ensuring buildings were in a defensible position, and he described that as being 10 to 15 meters depending on the terrain. Then I spoke to an insurance broker. We are a broker company, and I chose a fairly large broker in the Kelowna area who would have exposure to a lot of different insurance companies, just to find out from this particular individual, who also had direct company experience and had very recently been a manager, an underwriting manager with an insurer in British Columbia, and is now a broker, had an interesting perspective. And this, what I'm about to tell you in a lot of these cases, is probably going to be a little bit disturbing to some of you who are not in the insurance industry, but perhaps more common knowledge to those that are. And the perception is that 2003 fires have fallen off the radar screen, really. Initially, there was heightened awareness. There was a lot of initiatives with regard to Fire Smart and a lot of education programs, and it was very much in the forefront. But since then, it has very much fallen off. And I think that that's an important factor, because when we talk about keeping the awareness level up with the government, all government levels, I'm not sure who's going to do that exactly, but you would think that the insurers would be a major part of that. He says the most memorable issue, and this will of course resonate with the insurance companies that are represented here, to come out of 2003 fires was the fact that many homes were underinsured relative to the replacement cost, which has caused us in the insurance industry a lot of consternation over the years. And also, to put it in context, what he described was that, you know, there's a lot of competition for our attention. And so if you take British Columbia, for example, the hot issue right now is the issue of earthquake and fire following earthquake. And so when you have those kinds of competing issues, the whole issue of interface and problems with wildfire tend to be subordinated. When I moved over to Slave Lake to get some information, that was interesting. In Kelowna, they can issue the development permits and the building permits, and I understand, and I hope I've got this correct from a lady from Slave Lake, that the Slave Lake can actually control the developments, but they don't issue the building permits. That is actually a provincial responsibility. And there is no one, as far as I know, and the fellows from Slave Lake can address this if they know differently, requirement to engage in any kind of fire smart initiatives as part of the permit application process. Now, they have encouraged, and I think that this is more informal, residents to build using fire smart initiatives, but anecdotally, there doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of evidence to show that that is in fact taking place. Again, I will defer to our Slave Lake people when they get up here to correct that impression if it is incorrect. Again, I talked to a major broker in Slave Lake, and the insurers, because now post fire, is there any additional requirements? Are insurers now running scared of Slave Lake, that type of thing? And I've been advised that the insurers definitely are not abandoning Slave Lake, but there is no additional underwriting criteria being imposed or any additional questions being asked with regard to interface with wildlands. When I asked about fire smart initiatives, and I have to plead ignorance. He says, I see a lot of stuff around town with pink on it, which I understand may be a fire retardant material, but no other awareness of any kind of fire smart initiatives. And I'm stepping into some little dangerous territory, I think, with my next comments, but some of the things that we perhaps didn't think of in terms of the response and the concerns that have been created is the delays created by provincial and municipal governments. Extensive delay in releasing the sites. Now, there may be good reasons for this, but it does compound the whole issue with regard to when can you start building, additional living expense costs, that type of thing, and just general cost escalation. So it does create a concern for insurers and, of course, for the individual insureds who, they need to get going. And if you're not getting the sites released until, late summer or early fall, then the opportunity to get a building start going right away is diminished or squeezed down quite dramatically. Also, there is a concern, and this is all anecdotal, but there is a concern, and this fellow speaks to a lot of Slave Lake residents, that newer bylaws are being enforced on older homes. Simple things like a lot of homes that were built, they were allowed to have, let's say, gravel driveways. Well, new bylaws, since those homes were built, now require paved driveways. And so now a homeowner who is rebuilding needs to, because it wasn't there before, the insurers are not going to pay for that kind of thing. So it is costing them some additional money in those types of cases. So what I did then is I thought, well, okay, so this happened in Alberta. It should be fresh in our minds. I moved eastward to the Alberta-Saskatchewan border to a community called Cold Lake and Grand Centre. And some of you may know Cold Lake because it is a center where there's a very large Canadian Air Force base. And so I asked, okay, so are you worried? And the largest broker in town, the biggest game in town, basically says, no, we're not worried. And so maybe not the same topography as Slave Lake, which was one of the reasons why they said, we're not surrounded by extraordinary growth, that type of thing. Also, a very strong belief that Slave Lake was a one-off, and it was a freak situation, and the probability of it happening again is not likely. Now, I'm just repeating what I hear from the ground, so don't throw rotten tomatoes if you think differently. Sort of a perfect storm scenario is what was described. And again, you know, we're dealing with competing issues. So what does concern Slave Lake? Well, they have had infrastructure problems, which created, extensive water claims, which are now being fixed. So, you know, in terms of competition for what are the concerns that you have at the moment, that happens to be their particular concern. So, you know, when I came away from my discussions with a number of people, I think in general I can say that there's a strong belief that Kelowna and Slave Lake are basically one-offs, likely will soon be forgotten, if not already forgotten, and there are other competing concerns, such as earthquake and water damage. I was interested in Rob Scott's question because, as far as I know, there's no current models such as the tornado and hail model or earthquake models for wildland-urban interface risk. Tools such as the fire underwriter survey assess municipalities' capacity to respond to urban fires, but they don't contemplate necessarily the ability to fight encroaching wildfire. We also need to face the reality that even if the technical expertise to assess interface risk is developed, decisions by insurers have a significant business consideration component, such as market share, possible political backlash if you're going to stop writing in certain areas or you're going to raise the rates in certain areas. And one of the things that's already been answered by the people that presented this morning to a certain extent was a lack of knowledge perhaps by our industry as to what are the firefighting protocols. You know, how do you respond at which time, and you know, how many resources do you throw at fires that have a potential risk. So we do need the tools to assess wildfire risk to urban areas, and I don't believe that they currently exist. I will leave it to my compadres to round out the session. I believe we're going to take questions after we've all presented.